The first thing I remember about that night is how perfect everything looked when we arrived. The snow around the cottage was untouched, smooth like a white blanket stretched across the woods. The lake behind the house was frozen solid, glowing pale blue under the late afternoon sun. My friend Lila laughed as we dragged our bags through the snow, our breath fogging in the cold air. "This is going to be the most peaceful weekend ever," she said. I believed her. The cottage itself was small but beautiful, old wood beams, a stone fireplace, and huge windows that looked out into the forest. The owners had left a basket of firewood and a note welcoming us. It felt warm, cozy, safe. For the first few hours, everything was exactly what we hoped for. We lit a fire, made hot chocolate, and watched the snow slowly fall outside. The woods were silent except for the wind brushing through the trees. But winter nights come early. By the time the sun began sinking behind the trees, the forest changed. The blue light outside faded into gray, then black. The windows turned into dark mirrors reflecting the inside of the cottage. That's when we heard the first sound. A heavy crunch in the snow outside. Lila paused mid-sentence. "Probably a deer," she said. It did sound like something walking through deep snow, slow, deliberate steps. Crunch. 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 But it didn't pass by. It circled. The footsteps moved around the cottage, disappearing behind one wall, then appearing by another. Sometimes closer to the windows. Sometimes further away. "Maybe it's a moose," I suggested, though neither of us sounded convinced. The steps stopped suddenly outside the living room window. We both turned toward it. The curtains were open, and beyond the glass there was only darkness and falling snow. Then something tapped the window. 3 soft knocks. Tap. 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 Lila laughed nervously. "Animals don't knock." I got up to close the curtains, telling myself it was just a branch, blown by the wind. When I reached the window, I hesitated. Something had disturbed the snow right up against the glass. Footprints. But they weren't hooves. They looked almost like human footprints, except too long and too narrow, the toes stretched oddly, as if whatever made them had too many. I pulled the curtain shut. "Just a raccoon or something," I said, though raccoons don't leave footprints like that. The noises didn't stop. Throughout the evening we heard things moving outside. Sometimes pacing along the walls. Sometimes scraping against the wood. Once, something dragged slowly across the roof. Around midnight, a sound came from the back door. A handle rattling. Lila froze on the couch. "Did you lock that?" "Yes." The handle shook again, harder this time. Someone, or something, was trying to open it. The rattling stopped. Then came the knocking. Slow. Heavy. Thud. We didn't move. Thud. The third knock came from the side window instead. We both jumped. "Okay," Lila whispered, her voice shaking, "that's not normal." Neither of us slept that night. We sat on the couch with the lights on, the fire slowly dying in the fireplace, listening. Sometimes the footsteps returned. Sometimes we heard scratching along the walls like claws testing the wood. Once we heard something breathing right outside the front door, deep, wet breaths fogging the glass. At one point, near 3 in the morning, we heard something that made my stomach drop. A voice. Soft. right outside the door. Hello. It sounded almost human, but wrong somehow. The tone was flat, like someone repeating a word they didn't understand. Hello. Lila grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. We didn't answer. The voice repeated it again, slowly. Hello. And then, after a long pause, let me in. But the worst part wasn't the voice. The worst part was that it sounded exactly like me. Eventually the sounds faded. The woods grew quiet again. When the first grey light of morning crept through the windows, neither of us said a word. We just grabbed our bags, threw on our coats, and ran to the car. The snow outside glittered in the sunrise. For a moment, it almost felt normal again. Until I looked down. Footprints surrounded the cottage. Hundreds of them. All the same long, twisted shape. They circled the house over and over, pacing through the night. But there was something worse. They didn't come from the forest. Every single set of tracks started right at the walls of the cottage, as if whatever made them had climbed out of the house during the night and walked around it until morning. Lila and I never spoke about that trip again. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear something outside my door. A soft voice. My voice. Whispering gently through the hallway. Hello. The night it happened, the snow had already buried our street. I remember, because the world outside my window looked strangely quiet, like someone had turned the volume down on everything. The streetlights glowed through the falling snow, and the wind made soft whispering sounds against the house. My parents had gone to a dinner party, and told me they'd be home late. I didn't mind. I'd stayed up watching movies, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, until I finally dragged myself upstairs around midnight. By the time I got into bed, the house had that hollow nighttime feeling, pipes clicking in the walls, the occasional creak of wood settling in the cold. Normal sounds. The kind you ignore. I must have fallen asleep quickly, because the next thing I remember is waking up suddenly in the dark. I didn't know what time it was. But I knew what woke me. A sound. Scrape. It came from my closet. At first I stayed completely still, staring at the door across the room. The closet was closed, just like I'd left it. Scrape. It sounded like something slowly dragging across the inside of the door. My brain rushed to explain it away. Maybe something had fallen. Maybe a coat hanger slipped. Maybe the house was shifting. The sound stopped. I kept staring at the door for what felt like minutes. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. Eventually, my eyes grew heavy again. Just the house, I whispered to myself. And I went back to sleep. I don't know how much later it was when I woke again. But this time, I didn't wake slowly. I woke all at once. My eyes snapped open. The room felt different somehow. Cold. And that's when I saw it. My closet door was open. Not wide, just a few inches. I stared at it, my heart beating faster. I knew for a fact I hadn't opened it. Then I heard the sound again. Scrape. But it wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from underneath my bed. My entire body went numb. The sound was slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the wooden slats beneath the mattress. Scrape. Scrape. My mind suddenly flashed with a memory. That sound. I had heard it before. Not once. Not twice. 4 nights. At the time it always sounded far away, like it was coming from the bathroom down the hall, or from somewhere downstairs. Sometimes from inside the walls. I'd always told myself it was pipes, or the heater, or the wind pushing against the house. Because it was always distant. Easy to ignore. But now it wasn't distant. Now it was directly beneath me. The bed shifted slightly. Just enough for the mattress to dip. I clamped my hands over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Scrape. Something moved under the bed again. Slow. Patient. Like it knew exactly where I was. I pulled my knees up against my chest and stared at the edge of the mattress, terrified that something would peek out from underneath. Then I heard another sound. A car door slamming outside. My parents. Relief flooded through me so suddenly, I almost cried. I jumped out of bed and ran to the top of the stairs, just as they walked inside, snow clinging to their coats. Mom. Dad. They both looked up immediately. What's wrong? My dad asked. There's something in my room, I said, my voice shaking. Under my bed. My parents exchanged a quick look, the kind adults do when they think a kid is scared over nothing. But my dad still grabbed a flashlight. Let's go check. I followed them upstairs, staying close behind. My room looked exactly the same as we left it. Closet door open. Bed untouched. My dad knelt down and shined the flashlight under the bed. Nothing. He checked the closet next. Nothing there either. He walked through the entire house after that, every room, every hallway, every door. Nothing. Finally he came back and smiled gently. See? Just the house making noises. My mom hugged me and told me everything was fine. Eventually they went to bed. And I lay there staring at the ceiling. Trying to calm down. The house was quiet again. So quiet that I almost convinced myself they were right. Until I heard it. From downstairs. Scrape. Then another. Scrape. Slow. Moving through the house again. Far away. Just like it had every other night. Only now I knew something I hadn't realized before. The sound didn't move through the house. It moved toward my room. And every night. It was getting closer. Ethan told me this story last winter, and I still wish he hadn't. We were sitting in his car outside my house after work, snow drifting lazily past the streetlights. It was late, quiet, the kind of night where the world feels half asleep. Somehow the conversation drifted to sleep paralysis, and I mentioned those stories people tell about seeing things in their rooms. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, that actually happened to me." I laughed at first, thinking he meant a bad dream. But he didn't laugh back. He just stared through the windshield at the snow. Then he told me what happened. He said he woke up suddenly in the middle of the night to the sound of his morning alarm. Not the gentle chime his phone usually used, he'd set a loud, obnoxious ringtone, because he was terrible at waking up. It was blaring. That sharp, repeating digital melody filled the room. At first he was confused. It was still dark outside, and his room looked exactly the same as when he went to bed. But he couldn't move. Not even his fingers. He said the feeling was instant, the heavy pressure on his chest, the strange frozen panic you get when your brain wakes up, but your body doesn't. Sleep paralysis. He tried to reach for his phone on the nightstand. Nothing. His arms wouldn't move. The alarm kept ringing. And that's when he realized something was wrong. The sound wasn't coming from his nightstand. It was coming from the foot of the bed. He slowly opened his eyes fully. Something was standing there. At the end of the mattress. He said at first it looked almost human-shaped, but wrong in every possible way. It was extremely tall, so tall its head nearly brushed the ceiling, but its limbs were thin and stretched too long, like they had been pulled out of shape. Its shoulders were narrow and crooked, slumping unevenly like broken joints. Its skin wasn't really skin. He described it as looking pale gray and dry, like cracked clay left in the sun. Long fissures ran across its body, dark lines cutting through the surface. Its arms hung almost to the floor. And its hands. He said the fingers were impossibly long. Each one bent too many times, with extra knuckles that twitched slightly, as if they weren't fully under its control. But the worst part was its face. Or rather, the place where its face should have been. There were no eyes. No nose. No mouth. Just smooth, stretched skin pulled tightly across the front of its head like something had erased its features. Yet the alarm sound was clearly coming from it. The ringtone was perfect, exactly like his phone's alarm. But the creature had no mouth. Still, the sound echoed from inside its head. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. He said the sound didn't feel like it was just in the room. It felt like it was vibrating inside his skull. The thing stood there for a moment, perfectly still, as the ringtone continued. Then it tilted its head. Slowly. Like it was examining him. He tried to scream. Nothing came out. The creature lifted one leg and placed its foot onto the mattress. The bed dipped under its weight. Beep beep beep. The ringtone grew louder. Another step. The mattress sank again. Its limbs moved strangely, jerking slightly before each movement like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Then it crouched. Its long arms spread across the bed like spider legs, as it began crawling toward him. The alarm grew louder with every movement. Beep beep beep. He said he could see the cracks in its skin up close now, deep lines splitting across its arms and neck. Inside those cracks there was something darker, like shadow filling the spaces beneath the surface. The creature's head slowly lowered until that smooth, faceless surface was pointing directly at him. The ringtone was deafening now. The bed creaked as it crawled closer. One of its long fingers brushed the blanket near his leg. He said it felt like ice. The thing climbed higher, its limbs folding awkwardly over his body, the weight pressing into the mattress on both sides of him. The sound of the alarm was so loud now that he thought his ears would burst. And then the creature leaned down. That smooth, empty face hovered inches above his own. The ringtone erupted from inside its head like a screaming speaker. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. Beep. Ethan suddenly sat straight up in bed. The sound stopped. Morning light filled the room. His phone was on the nightstand. His real alarm was going off. He grabbed it immediately and turned it off. Then he just sat there, breathing hard. The room was normal again. Empty. Quiet. He told me he tried to laugh it off as just a nightmare. Sleep paralysis can do crazy things to your brain. But then he said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. When he turned the alarm off and set the phone back down, he noticed something on his blanket. Right where he'd felt that cold finger touch him. 4 long, gray lines. Like something with too many knuckles had dragged its hand across the fabric.